And sharks don't usually come to mind when you think of saving lives, but at UW-Madison, students and faculty are learning from these underwater creatures every day, leading to advancements in cancer research. WMTV's Mackenzie Davis shows us how nurse sharks are helping to get humans one step closer to curing deadly cancers.
These 6 nurse sharks from the Florida Keys now reside in a lab on the UW-Madison campus.
I'd love to be able to say that I work with them.
And they're currently fighting human cancer.
I've been working with them since the beginning.
UW graduate student Jaden West has worked with these sharks since they were brought on campus about 3 years ago.
It's definitely, one of the coolest animals you can use in this field, and not one you expect when you're not a wildlife biologist by trade at all.
Studying drug delivery mechanisms for cancer with the help of these underwater creatures.
We can use these shark antibodies to help traffic these drugs to the tumor and less of it into the body, so that a lot of the negative effects of chemotherapy can kind of be reduced.
What we do is we immunize the sharks against different types of human cancer.
Dr. Aaron LeBeau is an associate professor in the Department of Pathology of Laboratory Medicine and the Department of Radiology.
And we're using their immune systems to generate antibodies that will then be used to fight different types of cancer.
Cancers ranging from breast cancer to prostate, melanoma, and even lung cancer. So how does it work?
It's just like getting a COVID-19 jab or a flu vaccine, a simple injection beneath the skin of the shark, and then over time, the shark's immune system mounts an immune response towards that protein and develops antibodies against the protein.
From there, they draw blood from the shark and analyze it in their lab. But at the same time, both undergrad and graduate students get to learn from LeBeau and the sharks.
So many people have been able to come together and use the sharks as kind of a focal point around which to focus the efforts of our cancer treatments.
Over the last 3 years, Dr. LeBeau says the research has been quite successful.
We're making new discoveries every day. This is the only laboratory of its kind in the world that is developing shark antibody therapies for cancer.
Using these research findings for advancements at the UW Carbone Cancer Center.
It's been really cool to see how passionate people are that are, generally passionate about cancer always, but having something, cutting edge and a lot of fun.
In Madison, Mackenzie Davis, WMTV 15 News.